Good morning. I'm Liz Beardsley from US Green Building Council, and welcome from COP29 in Baku, here at the America's All-In Pavilion. And honored to be here today with Honorable Brendan Owens, Assistant Secretary of Energy Installations and Environment at the US Department of Defense. Welcome, Brendan. So we're going to be talking today about some of the amazing things that you may not know about what's been happening at Defense and why it's so important and why it's central to the mission. But maybe we can start with just an overview so people can sort of understand the scope of what's in your portfolio, the number of installations, buildings, and like all the different activities that kind of are under your purview.
Yeah, and I would say that in terms of all the things that would take a minute to go through, but just to give a general sense of, and first of all, thanks everybody for joining. If you are watching along at home, everybody has to wear earphones so they can hear over the noise. There's a lot going on in the hall, so everybody's wearing these, and I did it yesterday, and it makes your ears very hot, so I appreciate everybody doing that while hanging out for a minute. So the Department of Defense is a huge buildings owner and a huge lands owner. We have 535 installations all over the world, about 500,000 buildings and structures, about 220,000 houses that are dedicated to military families. We have about 26 million acres under management across the world, and we're the #1 GHG emitter for the U.S. federal government. So the work that we are doing encompasses mission readiness across all domains, sea, air, land, space, in partnership with our military departments, and are working towards making sure that the mission of DOD is always something that we are focused on.
Maybe you could tell us a bit about what's the current status with some of the renewable energy deployment, especially distributed and in partnership with energy storage and like creating more resilience on some of the installations.
Yeah, I think I'd like to just make sure that everything is grounded here in the reason that DOD is focused in this space. Energy is a mission enabler, right? And the mission is the thing that we stay focused on every minute of every day, right? So the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, Space Force are looking at the work that they are responsible to do, and it is not something that they can do without reliable energy resources, right? So that's electricity, that's liquid fuels, all of the above in terms of how we make sure that we are managing to the mission. And the work that we are doing to ensure that we have resilient and reliable access is an all the above strategy. So we're looking across all the different vulnerabilities, all the different challenges that exist in both a peacetime and a wartime context, and we are taking every step that we can to ensure that there is access to energy. So that's the foundation of why we are doing this. The what of what we're doing is to make sure that we are disconnecting our mission from logistics tails that are difficult to maintain during conflict. So that dictates to us a certain set of technologies and strategies that do create that capability, right? So if you think about the current posture of DOD in the continental United States, more than 99% of the energy that we use comes into the fence, right? So our installations, if you think of them as fence lines, more than 99% of the energy that we use on a day-to-day basis is imported into our installations, and that creates vulnerability to the mission. If the civilian power grid that we are reliant on, the civilian power grid that we are reliant on is a vulnerability for DOD. It is a known attack vector from both kinetic and cyber. We expect that to be the the first and a sustained part of any conflict that we would engage, but it's also susceptible to natural disasters, as we've seen in North Carolina this year, and that degrades capability when we are disrupted in that ability. So we are increasingly looking at energy resources that make it possible for us to be disconnected from those vulnerabilities, and a lot of that manifests as renewable energy resources, because you can put them in a place and a solar panel does not have a supply chain associated with it once it's generating electricity, right? The same with geothermal, the same with wind energy resources, the same with nuclear. So our efforts to deploy those technologies, while they are talked about in places like this as climate solutions, are really about mission continuity and making sure that we have the energy that we need at all times when we need it. So we're integrating that with microgrid investments that we've been making to make it possible for us to make sure that we can island from the grid if we need to, the bulk grid if we need to, the civilian power grid if we need to. And then we are also taking the opportunity to look at the rest of the energy transition that we are participating in to take advantage of capability that does not exist today but will increasingly tomorrow. And I guess the best example that I would give in that sense is right now, most of the cars that drive to DOD facilities are internal combustion engines. And when they get to the facility, they just sit in the parking lot. Increasingly what we're seeing is that as the economy makes the transition to electric vehicles, is we now have batteries driving to our installations. And if we have 10,000 50 kilowatt batteries sitting in the parking lot instead of just a bunch of internal combustion engines, that's a resource that we can leverage, right? So we look at the microgrid architecture that we've invested in, connecting it to the batteries that are in the cars, and we create resilience that didn't exist before. And then we are also doing all the things on efficiency, all the things on grid responsiveness, and then looking at energy storage, both in the form of what's in the parking lot, but also in the form of long duration and larger scale as additional layers of resilience to disruption from whether it's kinetic, cyber, or natural disaster.
It's really exciting how all these technologies are coming together and that you're able to deploy them in this way. And it's really meaningful on multiple levels, as you say. I'm curious, how are the base staff, the facilities teams, and the commanders, like what's the response that you're getting? As I imagine you're able to show them kind of the benefits, and then they're starting to experience it as you get these technologies in place. Could you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's actually been really encouraging to see what happens when a mission commander understands how much more resilient they can be by taking steps that are aligned with an energy transition. There's some really great case studies that are out there. I guess I'll point to the one that I was at most recently, which is Marine Corps Air Station in Miramar, California. They invested in a microgrid. They partnered with a local utility that has a landfill gas flaring operation that's going on. They capture the landfill gas, they turn it into electricity, and the electricity powers the microgrid. So those, and it's a net zero facility, net zero energy facility as a result of that. So those investments, when one mission commander sees it and goes and talks to their friends about all of these things, he or she is basically saying, look, I am more resilient to disruption. I can do my mission in the face of whatever gets thrown, adversaries are throwing at us, or the weather throws at us, and that is an increasingly understood piece of the puzzle. I think the other thing that we are increasingly seeing is a recognition that assumptions on resilience and reliability were, generally speaking, overly optimistic. And what I mean by that is, it's been sort of, until the last decade or so, it's been dogma that the homeland was a sanctuary. And that's not true anymore, right? We're seeing increasing levels of targeting and aggression of civilian power, water, and other energy infrastructures that mission commanders recognize in a new way as risk that they need to address, and they're getting after it to make sure that they can do that.
You mentioned that peer exchange, that's so important, and I'm curious here whether, generally there has not been much presence of national militaries other than the security that we all have and see on our walks into the center. Have you had opportunity to work with allies who are potentially also looking to transition their military operations in this way and add resilience and do some information sharing?
Yeah, yes, not as much as I think we need. It's an ongoing debate in our discussions about securitization of climate, right? So we don't want to make the focus of COP, and we want to make sure that we're not making the focus of the COP something that allows international competition to manifest unproductively, right? But we are here because the things that we are doing are enabling larger energy transition work. So there's an alignment and a harmony there, and we do seek out allies and partners when we are here. So we have met this week with several. I think what we are seeing and what we've experienced in the last couple of COPs that we've been to is that our focus on the alignment between the work that we are doing from a resilience and reliability standpoint, which again here is talked about as climate work, is not understood the same way by some of our allies and partners. So this year we took a trip to Indo-Pacific. We stopped in Japan, a couple of installations, went to Korea, a couple of installations. We looked for our partner, the person who has my job in those places, and we didn't find that person. So we want to catalyze those conversations. So we come to these places, meet with allies, ask them to go back and help us find the right people to talk to in those departments, because there is collaboration that needs to occur. And I think there is work that we can do together to accelerate the rate at which our investments are delivering results.
Yeah, and I would assume that in many countries, as you said, for the US, the military has the most buildings and the most emissions in many cases. So it's a real opportunity to do better.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's as significant as in other places, but I think the larger point is that we need to connect the people who do that work to our why, right? Not ask them to focus on climate. We need them to focus on the things that, again, are here climate related, but in the Pentagon are mission focused.
So you mentioned islanding and the importance of maintaining operations and that resilience from an installation perspective, but you also mentioned, like with Miramar example, that connectivity with the community and their resources and needs. And any base and installation doesn't exist. There's a context to it. There are communities. There's service members that are, as you say, like driving on and off every day and living elsewhere. So I know that's something that you've been doing work on to strengthen the relationships with base communities and kind of work together on some of these resilience issues. Is that something you say?
Yeah, I would say that we've done, like up until the last year or so, we've done a very good job of understanding our internal risk, inside the fence line risk. But what we've been doing over the course of the last year and a half is helping people understand that the mission doesn't reside just inside the fence line. 70% of the people who come to work on a military installation live in the defense communities that support them. So that relationship is interdependent in a way that is, you can't do the work without the people. And what we've been sort of talking through, and sometimes we show the picture, remember the picture of Goldman Sachs building in Lower Manhattan after Superstorm Sandy? It was the only building in Lower Manhattan that was lit up, right? Because they did the right things from a resilience perspective. They put their generators on the 3rd floor, they put their fuel on the 4th floor, or might have those flipped. But when the storm rolled through, their energy infrastructure was insulated from that. So the building was this beacon in Lower Manhattan, the only thing that had power after Sandy. But nobody could get to work, right? So it was this sort of, I don't want to call it a Pyrrhic victory because it's, it was function, but the larger context that building exists in was completely disrupted. And our installations are the same. If we don't want our installations to be the only thing in town that's lit up, because we want the people coming to work to be the best version of themselves, and if they're worried about the people that are at home in the community, that's not what we get. So we are increasingly looking at how interdependent we are on defense communities from an infrastructure standpoint, energy, water, and trying to make sure that solutions that we deploy inside the fence line are matched and sort of forward-leaning to be able to support outside the fence line when in situations of disruption.
That's great. Another related area, and I know one that you're really passionate about, is service members and service family housing, and trying to provide for them, high quality, healthy homes, efficient, and ones that really support a high quality of life. These are families that are often moving frequently. They're really, it's a real service that they give to the country. Can you tell us a bit about what you've been working on in that area?
Yeah, I guess I'll start by saying that in addition to being the EI&E job that I have, I'm also DOD's Chief Housing Officer. So our opportunity to provide, and that is both, you talk specifically about military families, that also encompasses non-married single military members, right? So, and we have responsibility over both types of housing. So we have unaccompanied housing, which is, I think, barracks and dorms, where single soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians will live. And then we have military family housing, about 220,000 military family houses in the United States, more overseas. And it is, like I said before, when we want the best version of our service members to show up at work, we got to start at home. So we have initiated a series of efforts to make sure that the quality of the housing that we provide to our service members and their families dignifies what they do on a daily basis. It's an all-volunteer force, has been for 50 years, and we want it to stay that way. So the challenge that we have is that we haven't lived up to that obligation in every situation. And I know, I have yet to meet the person who joined the military because we have world-class housing. But I know that I've met more than one person who left service, at least in part, because we don't. And that's a huge readiness challenge for DOD. And we have initiated a series of projects that are looking to make sure that the quality of the infrastructure that we provide to support them from a residential standpoint is meeting that bar of both dignifying of their service, but also making sure that it, when we can, enhances readiness. So looking at air quality, looking at lighting quality, looking at acoustics. We have people who live in very austere locations that need to make sure that their buildings function and give them the care and downtime that they need. And that has been a significant focus of everything that our team has been doing on the housing side for the entire time that we've been there. And I would say, just to broaden it beyond that, one of the things that we have initiated is what we call our resilient and healthy defense communities strategy. So the Deputy Secretary of Defense, who basically asked us to look at our portfolio through the lens of what it does to support people. That was the genesis of the Resilient and Healthy Defense Community strategy, and it is focused on making sure that the infrastructure on our installations, both built and natural, is configured in a way that actually enhances the lived experience and quality of life. Because when we do that, when we take care of our people, they become a more ready and a more capable force.
Yeah, and I just want to add a little bit to that for those that aren't as in the weeds as we are on buildings, just the connection between indoor air quality and indoor environments and health and wellness. So there's things like, if you're have older HVAC systems, and you might end up having mold problems, not to mention like temperature discomfort, and that can exacerbate asthma, and there can be also like dust and pollen and all that kind of stuff. And then with the wildfire risks that we're seeing increase, when outside air quality is not good, you have the opportunity to at least provide like improved air quality on the inside, and those are just a couple examples.
And we all lived through COVID, right? Our buildings did not serve us well during COVID, and that it's not the last pandemic that we will see, likely in our lifetimes. But there's a lot that we can do from a public health standpoint to focus on the infrastructure that we live and work in, to make sure that it is more resilient to all of the above threat hazards.
Is there, I know I just saw that bug. Is there an example, a success you can point to, an example on the housing front?
Yeah, we've got some significant traction with one of the, so a little bit of more backstory. The military family housing in the continental United States was privatized about 20 years ago. So the buildings themselves have a ground lease, but they are owned by service providers that maintain and sustain those buildings. So one of those companies, and I'm not going to shout it out, but one of those companies has initiated work with the International Well Building Institute to get a certain portion of their portfolio well certified. And I think that's the type of thing that we are increasingly wanting to see out of our providers of those, and service providers for those military family houses, to be able to say, look, this is the quality of the lived experience that we want you to deliver, and we are increasingly encouraging that, and focused on where we are not providing the level of service that we need, and holding them accountable where they need to be held accountable.
Thank you. So one thing I want to ask you about is, the U.S. military has, the scale that's really powerful, right, in many ways. And some of the technology investments have led to innovative products that come into the civilian world. And like some easy examples are like GPS and camo and things like that. Is there any in the buildings world that you see that maybe are coming down the road or related?
I'm not sure it's necessarily in the buildings world. We have all the different types of buildings, right? So at least one of them somewhere in our portfolio. But it's not necessarily something that I see DOD being the innovator, because our innovation is military mission, right? I will say that several of the things that I have been encouraged by from a sort of broader energy infrastructure perspective are, our forward deployed tactical microgrid work, where we take a forward operating base and we microgrid the whole thing to decrease the amount of liquid fuel that we need to bring forward to in a contested environment. That was a significant challenge during all the conflicts that we've ever had, and attacking supply convoys of liquid fuel is a thing that degrades mission capability and puts people at risk, significant risk. So our response to that in terms of efficiency, our response to making sure that we understand that this is a way that we can decrease risk to our service members is a direct response to that. The other things that we're doing from an innovation standpoint, we're doing a lot with a lot on the development of power beaming, like making sure that we can take, whether it's space-based or land-based, and without having to connect wires, put energy in a place to be able to power electrified equipment. And that's something that I think we're going to see more of. Our military departments, Air Force was the first, but Army and Navy are fast followers here, are investing in installation scale nuclear energy, which I think has significant promise to help us meet the mission, and because we're a COP, also decarbonize our energy infrastructure. So I think there's a lot of innovation that's happening as a result of the fact that we have a clear understanding of what the outcome we need out of our energy infrastructure looks like.
Yeah, that's good. I'll have to learn more about power beaming.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's really very cool.
And can I just do a time check? How are we doing? We're good? Okay. And I think another area where sort of the scale of what you're dealing with is unique is in sort of developing contracting models. Energy service contracts have been around for a while, but you have kind of a unique position. Is there anything, as we look to what states are doing in the U.S. and large corporations, are there any kind of lessons learned or things that we can learn from what's been going on at DOD in that area?
Yeah, I guess I'd go back to the nuclear example, because all of that work so far, and I don't see it changing very much, is going to be public-private partnership, right? So we are going to provide space. We have good fences, and we're going to work with a company to deploy a reactor at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska that's going to be owned and operated by that company, and the United States Air Force will be an off-taker, right? So there's various ways that we talk about this, but one of the three-letter acronyms that we use is enhanced use lease, right? And I think that there's any number of places where that public-private partnership via enhanced use lease can be leveraged. Renewable energy, solar, batteries, big grid, microgrids, all those things. So we have the ability to give the infrastructure, partner with an organization, and then let them come in, own and operate. And most of the situations that we've struck, most of the deals that we've struck so far end up being grid-facing resources for the most part, except in an emergency. And what that looks like is 99+% of the time, those resources that that are located on DOD land are managed as grid resources, to increase reliability and all the rest of the things. And they're just configured to allow them to turn inward to supply the military mission if needed. And I think that's the type of relationship that we seek to do more of, because it does leverage our ability for creative procurement, and it does not burden the department with requirements to be good at things that we don't need to be good at, like running nuclear reactors on land. We are very good at running nuclear reactors in the ocean, but that's a military thing. The installation energy thing is more commercial.
No, I mean, that's what public-private partnerships are about, is bringing the resources and expertise and money from each side to make the best partnership, right?
Yeah.
And what's been the appetite on the private side? Has there been Did you get a lot of interest? Was there, were they eager to work with DoD on these kind of things? Is the appetite there?
I think the appetite's certainly there. Yeah, we've gotten good response to all of the RFIs we've done on nuclear. We've gotten really good engagement with third-party financing, energy savings performance contracts, shared savings programs, those types of things. There's really good participation in that, and during this administration, we have really ramped up our expectations around how we want the military departments to leverage other people's money. And we're trying to create a situation, and I think we're getting better at it, where we are stacking direct investment on behalf of the Department of Defense, leveraging third-party financing, and then making the sum of each individual part something that's bigger than just the individual pieces. And I'll mention our Energy Resilience Conservation Investment Program, which is about an $800 million investment that DoD makes every year in microgrid architecture and systems on installations. We have leveraged utilities privatization with that money. We have leveraged performance contracts, energy savings performance contracts with that money, and the result is we get significantly more than just that $800 million deployed on our installations.
Perfect. Any questions from the audience? Are we able to take a few questions? Okay. And I think we have to listen.
Oh, we got to listen?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Well, it's being recorded, so we got to do it this way.
Our ears have to get hot now, too.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, can you hear me? I wanted to ask about cybersecurity and the energy transition, because I know that transitioning does open up some risk that may be newfound to the DoD. So I'm just curious how that's kind of weaved into the decision making. And also just want to thank you for your service. I think that this is really important and very necessary.
Yeah, right on. I appreciate that. Thanks very much. So, yeah, there's you probably know what authority to operate is, which ATO. Everything needs to be cyber compliant in order to come and be a part of our energy ecosystem. It is a barrier to rapidly scaling and transitioning. So I'll firmly admit that. But one of the things that we are making sure that we are focused on is that we are not adding new vulnerability to the system in this transition, right? So that's not the same thing as saying that we have corrected our existing vulnerability. There's a lot of work to be done there, and we're getting after that piece of it. But we are focused on making sure that we are not, by embracing the Internet of Things and the transactional nature of power that comes along with it, that we are not increasing our vulnerability. So it is something that we are very focused on and will be focused on going forward. And that goes down beyond just the cyber piece. It goes to all the supply chain as well. There's critical vulnerabilities that we have that we are also getting after from an industrial-based perspective that are equally important and equally challenging. Right on. Thanks.
Any other questions right now? Well, I can continue, but so obviously we're going to have a change in administration coming up, and wanted to ask what would you hope that your successor will take forward, and what advice might you have to that person?
There's one hope and one, I'd frame it as an expectation, quite frankly. As I've said maybe a couple too many times, we are here, DoD is at COP because all of the things that we are doing for our mission have climate co-benefits. We would be doing these things anyway because they increase readiness, they decrease risk, they increase resilience, right? So renewable energy is born out of the need for climate adaptation and mitigation, but it fits a need, satisfies a need that our military has. for logistics tail-free energy. And that is something that I expect, quite frankly, the people who sit in chairs like the one I get to sit in for, I don't know, another 8 weeks or so, I expect that to be something that they recognize, because if we pivot into the way that we've done business before, we are increasing vulnerability. We are doubling down on known risk. And I think that would be a significant mistake to change course for the sake of whatever reason would be driving that desire to change course. So I think that, from my perspective, is an expectation that all the things that we're doing to reduce risk that have climate co-benefit will endure. The thing that I hope is that we have laid enough groundwork on making sure that people understand the risk that they introduce when they underfund infrastructure. I hope we've made enough ground there so that we don't have to relearn those lessons again. And I think the Resilient and Healthy Defense Community strategy that we signed is centered on people as the thing that need to be sustained. We can't provide the people that are the best version of themselves for the mission if we don't address the places that they live and work in a very fundamental way. So I hope that we've convinced enough people in the Pentagon and at installation levels that the risk that we have been assuming by underfunding sustainment is not just about the risk to the infrastructure, it's about the risk to the people, which is a risk to readiness, which is a risk to mission, right? So I hope that we've done a good enough job doing that. I will certainly, in whatever capacity I am, people are interested in listening to me do it in, I will certainly continue to tell that story and amplify those realities as much as I can. But it's, different leaders have different priorities. I hope this doesn't fall off the map in the transition.
Thank you. That's very thoughtful. Picking up on that, the people and installations are very diverse, right? So in rural areas, in urban areas, large ones, small ones, and around the globe, what are some of the things you've learned about since you've been at DOD and like things you didn't know, or kind of, and how are the different installations situated in terms of being able to operate and learn about some of these advanced technologies that are helping them become resilient, like the microgrids and things like that?
I think the thing that I didn't appreciate coming into this job is how much of everything DOD has and how tied it is to place. We can't park submarines any place but where they are parked, which puts them in very vulnerable positions from a climate change perspective. The adaptation to this reality that we live in now is something that we're moving out on, but it is very likely going to be late to need, and it has been to date, right? So Tyndall Air Force Base got run over by a hurricane, cost us $5 billion, right? Guam got run over by a super typhoon, $12 billion is the bill that's going there. Offutt Air Force Base, Camp Lejeune, West Point, and we can just go down the list. Wildfires in the West, compromising military mission. That reality is something that we will always be facing, and need to make sure that we are postured to deliver the next version of whatever a building on a DOD installation ends up being needs to be fit the need, fit the risk. And we've been working on the UFC, which is the Unified Facilities Criteria, which is DOD's building code, in order to make that possible. We can't just go out and wholesale replace everything. That's not logically something that is in the realm of possible from a budgetary standpoint. But we can make the next building we build the version that it needs to be for the future. And that's what we've been doing. So I think that sort of totality of challenge that we have was something that I didn't appreciate before I came into this job. The vastness of it all was something that we are learning puts us at great risk, because while I did talk about the money associated with each of those disasters, the real problem is that we did not have Tyndall Air Force Base to train pilots, right? That is the readiness risk and the mission risk. And yes, the money is part of the challenge, and it constrains our ability to execute, innovation and mission in other parts of the portfolio. But we were, without that, had to adapt our mission to the loss of that asset, and that's the real that ends up being the real challenge to our readiness.
Yeah, and that's where some of those public-private partnerships come in, right? To try to be able to do more with what you have. Yeah. What's one thing you're especially proud of?
I am really proud of the RHDC. It like I said, I think it centers us on the thing that matters, which is our people, as the mission. And I like I said, I hope that is something that continues. I'm also really proud of the work that we did to highlight what's possible, right? I think that there's a general sense that when you start changing things around, it's always going to be more expensive. I think that there's plenty of case studies that we've been able to sort of point to, that when we electrify buildings, it actually can reduce the amount of overall energy spend and make them more resilient while you do it. So I think that's another piece of the puzzle that we've been able to sort of explain and expose decision makers who are in the situations to change the way that they act going forward. So the electrification memo that we signed, which basically says all DOD buildings going forward will be all electric, and then everything that gets renovated is going to be electrified during the process of renovation, is another thing that I'm really proud of, because it brings us back to, it opens the door as to why we would take those steps. And again, in places like this, electrification is a decarbonization strategy, but electrification from a DOD installations perspective is a resilience thing, because we can make electricity out of a lot of different things. We can make it out of nuclear, we can make it out of wind, we can make it out of solar, we can make it out of potatoes with a cathode and an anode and a piece of copper that connects like one of those clocks. A big pile of potatoes and a big cathode and a big anode. But, and that optionality increases our resilience, right? So if the gas grid goes down, we can pivot to something else. If liquid fuel is unavailable, we can pivot to something else. If the sun's not shining, we can pivot to something else. And that again, that resilience that is achieved as a result of electrification is something that we are, those are the types of stories that we're able to tell as a result of the policy, and we were able to share with our installation commanders how this actually helps them be better at their jobs.
Yeah, and as you know, I just came from Greenbuild earlier this week. It's been a long week, and had a session on zero-emission buildings, and one of our panelists from Empire State Realty Trust was talking about how electrification, in their case for the purpose of decarbonization, but with efficiency, was a less costly retrofit alternative at this point in time. So it didn't require an upgrade of service. It was going to save money basically on day one, provide better air quality and other things. So really that's changed a lot with the improvements in technology and all the electric heating and cooling products now available at scale, so larger ones as well. So it's pretty exciting. So it's amazing what you've accomplished, Honorable Owens, and I want to thank you for your service as well. And any closing thoughts here from the America's All In Pavilion at COP?
In Baku, yeah. I guess. Look, I do turn into a pumpkin here at the end of this administration, but I think one of the things that we've been looking at, and one of the things, quite frankly, the talking point for us this entire week has been exactly what we talked about, which is these things that the DoD at least has been doing are very likely to endure because they enhance our ability to do our job. I think there's any number of places where there's reason for continued optimism, whether it's state level or wherever. But industry plays a role in helping us shape what we can actually accomplish. So I would encourage all the industry that's out there who is interested in partnering with the Department of Defense to understand that when they meet us where the mission is and help us enhance that, then we're ready for those conversations and enhancing our ability to do the mission by doing things like deploying large-scale renewable energy on installations in partnership with third parties who are bringing other people's money to the game. There's an appetite for more of that at an installation level, and I would encourage people to just start knocking on doors, showing what's capable to continue to move the ball down the field here. So, thanks very much.
Please join me in thanking Honorable Owens.
Thank you.